So it was almost like, yeah, all of these things are happening and they're bad, but they're all my fault.
I'm afraid that the next time I'm not going to make it because I don't know who this man is.
After healing physically, I began, the lifelong process of healing emotionally.
I think the simplest answer to why we should do research in the violence against women area is starkly because women's lives are at stake. And I think in a compelling way we have to know that research can play a role in stopping that.
Without numbers, without really legitimate commitment of funds, without real investment in really seeing what a huge epidemic and social problem this is, I think we continue to put Band-Aids on heart attacks. I think research is crucial.
I think one of the central pieces behind effective change is understanding the whys. And that's where science comes in. I see the purpose of exploring research on violence against women as to help us understand the whys so that we can develop effective programs to reduce the incidence by which people experience violence.
But as a graduate school professor of mine once said, it's important to pull drowning people out of a river, but at some point you need to go upriver to see who's throwing them in. And I think that's where you find the academic response to violence against women. We're upriver. We're trying to figure out who's throwing them in, which is to say, we're trying to understand more about violence against women. Who perpetrates these kinds of crimes against women and their children? What are the effects on those women?
So now we have a chance to impact the lives of women and children and husbands, but also we have a chance to do it not only based on a bunch of stories, but based on true facts that we can find through our research.
About 6.5 years ago, as the second term of then Governor Patton was ending, we began to look broadly at what the Patton administration had done to address violence against women, but more broadly what Kentucky had done to address violence against women. And what we realized was that we lacked one major partner in the field, and that was higher education.
For us to set up the Center for Research on Violence Against Women was an opportunity to do something nobody else was doing. And you've got to be leading edge. The only way to be leading edge now is to be interdisciplinary. You don't solve tough problems by doing it yourself.
The center really serves as a clearinghouse for folks to make connections with one another so that the synergism produces better research.
I feel that this area, this problem, is very large, but you can't understand it and you can't address it from a single disciplinary perspective.
So the center itself does research, but equally we attempt to facilitate the research of others. We have a model whereby we are trying to recruit endowed chairs of study on violence against women and place them in academic departments around the university. So we're raising $1 million at a time, and then with that $1 million we are endowing a chair of study on violence against women. It's a model that has yet to be replicated anywhere else, but I think it is a model that will allow us to have the strongest research portfolios all across the University of Kentucky.
Actually, we were in the kitchen and I was cooking and I was at the stove and I had a boiling pan, a saucepan of boiling water, and I was getting ready to make some pasta for the kids. And my son had screamed something through the house, and he got real ugly and turned around and screamed something back to him. I asked him, it's not a big deal, they're completely in a different room. He just looked at me, and I turned, and he just picked up the saucepan. It was boiling water and smacked me right in the face with it and knocked out 3 of my teeth. And I've got scars here on my face, thank goodness for makeup, and here on my back. And at that point, I knew there was major trouble ahead. I put the plan in motion and it did it. I grabbed, my birth certificate, a couple photo albums, some jewelry, put things together and hid them in the house. I went around the corner to a used car place. I bought myself a used vehicle. Nobody knew, nobody. And she loaded the car, and at 3:30 in the morning that night, I left. I got myself a good job, and I filed for divorce. And of course, when you do that, then they know where you're at. So after the divorce was finalized, I decided that I needed to leave Arizona. So I literally opened up the map, and I just pointed somewhere that was halfway between Vermont and Arizona, somewhere where I knew no one within a 4-state radius, no one. And it actually happened to be Hazard, Kentucky. And I was in Hazard for about 5 months, and I came home from work one day, and there was a letter in my mailbox. And the letter very plainly stated, "You can run and you can hide, but I hear the weather in Kentucky can be hazardous." And I freaked. I called one of my friends. I said, "I need to go to Lexington, it's a big city, and get lost." And came here, stayed at the Red Roof Inn. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. I just knew I was on the run again and scared, real scared now. And I finally called and talked to one of the crisis call people here, and within about 4 hours, I landed at the domestic violence shelter and started rebuilding my life again.
Your female gender is what will determine whether or not you will be abused, sexually assaulted. And so I think we have to really look at that and then ask the question, well, why is that? Why is there a specific part of the human race that is more at risk for these horrible atrocities?
I think historically people have dealt with violence against women by assuming it's someone else's problem. I don't have to worry about this, it would never happen in my family. I don't have to worry about this, it would never happen to me. Maybe I'm in a middle income bracket, or I'm in an upper income bracket, or I behave in a certain way, so violence against women would never happen to me. And yet we know that violence against women has no boundaries of age or race or ethnicity or religion or income level.
Globally, it looks like rape as a weapon of war. It looks like genital mutilation as a way to control women's sexuality, because that's apparently very threatening. And it also, human trafficking is a huge issue. I think we're just beginning to wake up in the United States to the fact that we have it here. And that is happening to our own, not just people in other countries.
If you would have looked back in newspapers or the media back in like the early 1970s, you never would have heard about physical abuse. Everybody said it's a hidden phenomenon, what goes on behind people's, closed front doors. It's private, you don't look at it, you don't talk about it.
the same thing that makes us wonderful in Kentucky and in rural areas, which is we protect our own, and we kind of are a homogeneous community. It's also what supports violence, because we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to take it out of the family, and we don't want to turn in our own men, our own cousins, our own brothers. I mean, violence is not done by a weird stranger in a raincoat, it's done by an intimate partner.
I believe domestic violence is that best kept secret that everybody knows about.
Then really those social norms that are not challenged allow violence to continue.
In the most recent national prevalence study done, we find that over half the nation's women report the experience of physical assault. We find 18% of women reporting the experience of rape or attempted rape. In a recent meta-analysis, we find that 23% of our nation's women had the experience of stalking victimization. In 80% of homes where there is intimate partner violence, there are children there who witnessed that crime happening. Researchers have to be part of the storytelling around violence against women because the problem is so serious. The single most common cause of mortality in pregnant women in the United States today is homicide. That is information that needs to be in the hands of obstetricians and gynecologists and pediatricians so that they can do a better job for women who come into their clinics of asking questions, of ensuring that if a woman has exposure to violence in her home, that protections are put into place. Protections for her and protections for her pregnancy. We believe one way to do that is to make sure very simply that questions are being asked of women, what we call universal screening.
It's a process where we ask women on the first visit a series of questions that help us to understand what we might be able to do to help them be safer, when they take their babies home.
Women who experience violence during pregnancy are much more likely to deliver an infant who is low birth weight. And infants that are born when they are at a smaller gestational age also can be associated with violence against women during pregnancy. We also know that women who experience violence are more likely to lose an infant.
And with the new universal screening, because of the questions that we ask, we now make it a private appointment. So we tell them when they call for the appointment that this appointment will just be for them, that no family members will be allowed to come in with them. And we also explain that at other appointments, their family members can be with them. But that sort of, I think, has led to women being able to be more open with us when we talk to them.
So we don't yet know whether screening results in health improvements. And one can imagine why screening might, in that you can identify the violence early in the pregnancy and help the woman find alternatives or safe places to be during that period. So there's many interventions that we know work. It's just a matter of getting those resources to women when they can best use those. So we're changing our norms then in healthcare to identify that, to acknowledge that violence is a problem for many women, and that we also can do something about that by simply asking.
The way that he had of making me believe that things happened because they were my fault was very overpowering to me. I mean, it really changed my whole attitude and persona about things. He would come in the door and I'd be, sitting down. What are you doing? Don't you have something else you need to be doing? You can't think a complete thought, little, and speak a complete thought. And just basically treat me like I was an idiot, not just in our own family, but even in front of other people sometimes. He choked my son one time, and he had choke marks on his neck, and they called the Child Protective Services. But he had me convinced that he had to do that for a reason. And so it was almost like, yeah, all of these things are happening and they're bad, but they're all my fault. And so this friend said, wait a minute, he was outside enough of the situation. He sent me to the pastor of my church who said, look, you and your children are in danger and you have got to get